Is there a realistic chance, Josh, that London could actually take over Huddersfield and still keep it as a 14 team?
I think IMG could save them come to the end of the year, but it's a tough one, isn't it? Because London Broncos want to be in that top 14. They're ambitious.
Hello everybody and welcome to the latest episode at Back 10 here from All Out Rugby League studio. This week I will be joined by our All Out regulars, Danny Maguire and Josh McAllister, to discuss and break down everything that's been going on in the world of rugby league over the last 7 days. But before we do that, delighted to say that we are almost there. 10,000 subscribers that we asked you at the start of the season. We are not far away at all. Remember guys to like, subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything here at All Out Rugby League. Remember as well, if you're watching on a mobile phone or tablet, you can swipe to the left in the comments and reveal that hype button. You can click that up to 3 times a week. That allows us to bring you more and more content and help grow our show. So remember, subscribe. Now, let's get into the show. So last time we had Danny Maguire in the studio, he was just about to head out to Las Vegas. Magsy, how was it?
I'm still recovering, mate. Still recovering. Do you know what? One of the best experiences through Rugby League I've been part of. Such a great occasion. Vegas is amazing. It's an amazing place and you can have such a good time. But for me, the best part of it was game day.
Yeah. The
game day experience, the walk to the ground, sat in the middle of the Rhinos fans, the result. Just everything that came with the game, it was really special and we need to be part of it. Whatever we do moving forward, it's something we need to be part of.
Absolutely. Now, I hear people doubting it, saying, well, what's the point of it, the expansion and all that? But I just think if you go and if you're a fan, to have that once-in-a-lifetime experience, to go watch your team, experience Vegas and watch your team there, is just unbelievable, isn't it? It's just about enjoying it as well for the current fans as well. I know we're all about expansion, but just to give a reward almost to current fans, the dedicated, loyal fans that can go, it's just something special, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I spoke to a lot of Hull KR fans, a lot of Rhinos fans, and they just loved it. They just had such an amazing time. Everybody got on really well. Great result for the Rhinos. Not so great for the Robins fans, but an unbelievable few days. And like I say, it's something we need to be part of moving forward. Whether it is in Vegas for longer term or wherever the NRL decide to take it, it's something we need to be part of.
But there is a trade-off, isn't there? And as we saw over the last 2 seasons, of course, Wigan Warriors, they had somewhat of a hangover after Las Vegas, losing possibly a week later after that to Hull FC in the Challenge Cup. We saw Danny, Leeds Rhinos again. Let's be honest, a disappointing performance, really. Credit to Wakefield, but is the Vegas hangover thing? Is it a thing?
Well, the other argument is that Hull KR got the job done against Huddersfield, albeit, that's a different story because Huddersfield are out without 15 first-team players in an injury crisis I don't think anyone's ever seen before. I think maybe for Leeds Rhinos it's just a one-off. I don't buy into the Vegas hangover, and I don't think anyone at the club, players or coaches will either, to be honest with you.
Well, Magsy, Brad Arthur mentioned casual. That's what he said. He described his players' mindset as everything they did was just not where they needed to be. Is that something you saw?
Yeah. I think that was evident the way that they went about things. I'd rather talk about how good Wakefield were, though. Leeds were a little bit flat and emotionally they were a little bit down on where they have been. But I thought Wakey were great. I thought they played really, really well. The spine were influential. The 6-7, Sinfield and Truman were very good. The 9, I know you like the 9 as well. Yeah. I thought he was really good and really busy around dummy half. So, whereas Leeds were a little bit flat, there's no getting away from that, but I felt like Wakefield, probably the best they've played this season, and deserved the win. Well,
a couple of nice tries from Wakefield. I liked the short little passing they did. I think Jay Pitts put Stroughton through, I think it was, and Fatatilli as well. He come up with a nice little pass and just going straight through the middle of the Rhinos as well. It was good to see. Yeah,
it was a good game to watch. I was at Wigan Huddersfield that night, but I kept as well in the loop with it, with the lights that went off for 20 minutes. That was a big talking point, wasn't it?
We've not even mentioned that. Yeah, what was that like?
It was interesting. We just carried on as normal. I think Wakey are doing it really well. I'm a big fan of Matt Ellis. I think he's doing amazing things there. The stadiums, compared to when you played there absolutely. And we played a lot of games there. It was a tough place to go. The facilities weren't great, but they had a light show before the game, and it was a really good atmosphere, decent crowd for the Challenge Cup game. And then obviously the lights just went off, so it was a bit of an interesting period. But I bet the Rhinos wish they'd have stayed off, to be honest with you. But yeah, no, I think they're doing some great things at Wakey, and they thoroughly deserve the win.
It was funny though, wasn't it? I was watching it on telly, and then as the floodlights were coming on corner by corner, the crowd were, oh, hey. Look, there was obviously it's not ideal, but Wakefield reacted in the right way, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, and I've been really impressed by Sinfield so far this year. You probably give a bit more of an insight, but he's just really seized his opportunity under Darryl Powell, and he's giving him a headache now because Mason Leno, I think he might be struggling with an injury, but I don't think he's going to get a look in as easy as you might fancy now because Sinfield's absolutely ripping it up.
But that's what you need, Mags, isn't it? You need competition for places, particularly in those dominant, key positions as well. If you've got a young half snipping away, you've got to find and reinvent yourself again, I suppose.
I think it was a great move for Jack. I'm a big fan. Obviously, I've known him since he was a young kid, and I follow his career closely. And it was really hard for him at Leeds. I think obviously, with what his dad achieved, and I think it's a great move at the right time. I think Wakey suits his style. I think he'll be able to mature and develop under Darryl Powell, and we saw some of that on Friday night. Really mature. Game-winning performance alongside Truman, and I really like that combination of them two.
Yeah, sometimes when, I can only speak about my time when I was obviously at the Rhinos, and then you have to sort of leave a big club and almost play for, I know Wakefield are a club that are improving, but they're still a club where you're allowed to make mistakes and grow as a player before you get to where your potential may take you. So I've no doubt that Jack Sinfield will certainly improve under Darryl Powell. But just on Leeds there, Magsy, 2020, you've got to go back to the last time that they progressed through from the last 16. That's too long, isn't it? It's too long for Leeds Rhinos, that.
That's a worry. Yeah, it's a worry. I think the cup competition is different in it. I think to be able to, I suppose, get yourself up at different intervals. So, your first round, then your quarter final, and be able to manage a cup competition is something that's quite difficult alongside your Super League, and I don't think the Rhinos have got that yet. We saw a great performance against Hull KR in Vegas. They were gritty and determined against Cass. They backed it up, but then they weren't able to do it again the week after, and that's probably something that Brad's trying to develop there, that consistency, that ability to be able to, I suppose, win when things aren't quite perfect. And like I said, I've always said that expectations are high at the Rhinos. They expect to be in the finals, and to not be in the Challenge Cup's disappointing.
But Leeds still are a second in terms of Challenge Cup wins. But there's got to be some anger towards the fans, because I think the fans would have really, really wanted and hoped for a trip to Wembley. Again, it's been a long time since 2020. They were robbed of that opportunity given the pandemic to actually be there and watch the team. So you've got to go back even further, haven't you?
Yeah, and Danny said then it's a big club with big expectations, and supporters expect to be at the big dances, the Wembleys and the Old Traffords, and the fact they've not been at Wembley since 2020, which was behind closed doors due to COVID. Yeah, they'll be disappointed. And looking into the season, when you look at who was going to pick up trophies, Leeds would have been one of the favourites for the Challenge Cup, given the squad and the way they've developed under Brad Alford. So that'd be a big disappointment to them. So now really need to put all that focus into the route to Old Trafford, because I think now they need to make that. The expectations will be that they've got to make Old Trafford at the end of the year.
Is that the chat there, Danny? Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, we've been involved in Challenge Cup runs that actually don't go the way you planned, whether you lose early or. I suppose the only benefit and the way that you can look at it is now you can have some weekends that you're not playing, so it's an opportunity to refresh, to work on some things. So you've got to use, I suppose, the negative of losing in a Challenge Cup as a positive now. And and Brad's a really, really smart coach. He's very experienced, and I actually fancy Leeds to finish top now. I really do. I think without the distraction of the Challenge Cup, I think the League Leaders' Shield is there for the taking. And like you said, Josh, I think it has to be a grand final now. It has to be a grand final appearance.
Well, there's 3 weekends now that they can refresh and rehab, recover, whatever it is they need to do, that they're going to get back really now, and make a big claim for the only prize that they've got left really in terms of a grand final. So we'll see how that unfolds. But look, we mentioned about crowds there. We mentioned about the COVID crowd at Wembley where there was no fans. Look, we can't ignore it. Let's switch over to the other team that was part of the Vegas trip in Hull KR, but they were playing at a pretty much empty Huddersfield Giants Stadium, wasn't it? If it hadn't been for those Hull KR fans, Josh, you were there, I was there. That is a concern as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a big concern. We'll go into it, I imagine, in a second. I just don't know what the answer with the Challenge Cup is at the minute. Look, elsewhere, there were some big crowds. There was nearly 9,000 between Wigan and Bradford Friday night. I think 7,000 Wakefield Leeds. But, yeah, there was probably only 200 fans, 300 Huddersfield fans on the Sunday. And that's just left with people with doubts over Huddersfield Giants. Look, in the IMG, they were 12th on the ladder last year. Performance obviously plays a bigger part this year. So I think they were 10th on the performance ladder last year. That might drop now with given the finishes. So, you know, there's a big question over Huddersfield, what they bring, the value to Super League, especially with London Broncos on the rise, if it will expand again from 14. There's loads of question marks over Huddersfield at the minute. But Ken Davey, you can't doubt how much money and time and effort he's put in there. You do feel sorry for them. And I feel sorry for Luke Robinson because I don't think he's been given a fair chance with a full squad to play since he's taken over.
No, he hasn't, and that's just what I wanted to sort of reiterate there. Look, I understand it's a difficult sell when your team has got 16 players out. You know, you sat where you are and that you've not got a win on the board yet. However, you know, 200 fans there, pretty much, 200-300 maybe tops. You know, had that game had been Catalan Dragons at Huddersfield, goodness me, what, you know, where would we be at there?
I'm worried about the Challenge Cup. I'm worried about it. I love the competition. My best rugby league memories as a young kid are watching the Challenge Cup draw. I wouldn't even know when the draws are, to be honest with you now. You know, looking for who you were going to play, you know, getting excited for the games on a weekend. I know some people were trying to find the game on Friday night and it were red button this, red button that. And, you know, I'm worried about the Challenge Cup. I'm worried where we're going with it. It's the best competition. It's such an amazing history and it's prestigious and all the players want to be involved in it. But for me, there's a lack of, I don't know, where we going, do you know what I mean? And
what do you put that down to then, Magsy? Because
I don't know.
You can be a fan and you can get your season ticket and you can go every week. Does a deal need to be made where, you know, Challenge Cup games are incorporated into a season ticket where it's almost a lottery because you could be away all the way through the competition, couldn't you? But I don't know. How do you reignite that amongst fans to get there and go and support Huddersfield? You know, go and support them against Hull KR. Yes, they're high flying, but your team still needs you. You know, there needs to be something there where, because it was soulless.
Sunday was probably the time that Huddersfield needed their fans the most because they needed that number, that extra support. Because as you say, there was 15 players out through injury. There was three named for the debuts. I just don't know what the answer is for the Challenge Cup. I don't know what the answer is for Wembley. I know it was discussed of making a potential Magic Weekend of the Challenge Cup quarterfinals, but where'd you play that? And then there's not enough room in the calendar for that and
Dublin.
Super League.
Dublin. How good would that be?
Yeah, it would be good. Yeah, and there's talk of Dublin next year between Warrington and Wigan. I think next year Super League could be played in 5 countries, which is massive. You know, we've got to look at the positives as well. But just on the Challenge Cup, I just don't know what the answer is. That to play devil's advocate on that, if you play Dublin, you've got 4 weeks to book that trip if you're in the quarterfinals. So
I just think as well this week the game was played differently. There was no video refs at any of the games, and you know I've heard a couple of the coaches disappointed with some of the. We're either going to take the competition serious like it should be and make it a real figure of our game, or let's not bother because we're doing it a disrespect. You know what I mean? I just think some of the crowds were good, and I was at the Leeds Wakey game, and the atmosphere was good. But you know, a lot of the Leeds fans after. I remember when I was younger, when Leeds lost in the Challenge Cup, I'd be devastated for even playing. I'd be devastated for weeks. You know, it's lost a bit of its glamour to me, and we need to find a way to make it special again.
One of those coaches that Mags is referring to, Ryan Carr, he was. He almost couldn't put into words how gobsmacked he was. I think it was particularly around the Mark Percival try that was in the bottom left-hand corner. And mentioning no video referees. I mean, look, every week we seem to be on here talking about video referees and how long they take. And then when we don't have them, we're now moaning that we don't have them. So, you know, it's a bit of a tricky one, isn't it?
It is another tricky one. And I don't really like bagging referees. I think they've got a tough job. We need them in the sport. But from the games I watched on the weekend, they were really slow. The Wigan game on Friday night, the ruck speed was really slow. It was just a really slow watch. It wasn't an entertaining game. There was no oomph to it at all. And that's not what it just felt different to the first 3 or 4 weeks that we've seen in Super League. So that was a major thing as well for me on Friday. Again, how do you get video referees to all Challenge Cup games if they're not going to be televised? That's something that the RFL have to work out if that's the way we're going to go. If we're going to have video referee every Super League game and then eventually in the semi-finals of the Challenge Cup there will be, then how do we get it in the
But
early
even
rounds
that
as
in
well?
itself, sorry Josh, is bonkers, isn't it? How you can have video referees for the last 2 games, but you can't have one for the rest of the... It's mad, isn't it?
It's just consistency. I think, coaches, players, fans just want consistency. They just want to know what's happening. And I think when things like this are different, you notice it a bit more. It's noticeable that, there's no video ref. And I don't mind it, to be honest with you. I think sometimes the video refs take too long and we end up slowing the product down. So I'm okay with it, but it's just the yes, no, the inconsistency of it that's the problem for me. And the whole inconsistency of the Challenge Cup, we need to grab it and make it special again.
Yeah. And just going back to Huddersfield, you mentioned about IMG. We had Paul Aiken on right at the very start of this season talking about potentially expanding the competition to 15. I mean, is there a case of and I understand the history that's around the game at Huddersfield. They're on about moving stadium and etc. Is there a realistic chance, sorry, Josh, that London could actually take over Huddersfield and still keep it as a 14 team?
Well, that's the big picture for IMG, isn't it? Say, I think they finished last year in 12th, York and Toulouse below them, but there was a good point a bit ahead of them. So I think at the end of the year, the performance, as you say, has a bigger say in this year's, and they're obviously going to finish. Well, I say obviously, it looks like they might finish, or they're going to finish that sort of bottom 3, bottom 4 Huddersfield, the way things have started. I think IMG could save them come to the end of the year, but it's a tough one, isn't it? Because London Broncos want to be in that top 14, they're ambitious.
Yeah.
I just don't think... It's a strange one with Huddersfield. I think recruitment-wise, they've not got it quite right in recent years in a salary cap sport. I think they've just not spending too right. You look at the squad, even before you went into the season, it's not a squad that was ever going to compete with the likes of Wigan and Hull KR and Leeds Rhinos. So it's just a difficult one at Huddersfield. But Ken Davey, again, is just...
You feel sorry for him, don't you?
Yeah, do, absolutely, yeah.
He's put his hand in his pocket and he's so passionate about it and he's trying his absolute best. Magsy, I remember last year I covered a game. It was Wigan against Huddersfield at Dewsbury, and it felt like a home game. Do you know, it felt like a home game because of how small the stadium was. And I can't remember exact numbers, but I think there's maybe 4,000 in there. But it felt like a team that belonged there. I mean, is it time for Huddersfield just to leave that stadium? And we've played there, and you've got to make your own atmosphere. It's difficult, it's too big.
I think it's really hard, innit? I've got contrasting thoughts on Huddersfield. It's a birthplace of our game, and it's where it all started.
Yeah.
So there's that history there, and I never forget the history of the game because it's really important. But the stadium's amazing when it's full. I've played in some great games, then some semi-finals where when there's 20,000 plus in there, it's such a good atmosphere. But when there's 1,000 in there, it's really tough. It's really tough. And Ken Davies is amazing. The amount of money that he's put into the game and into Huddersfield to keep Huddersfield alive is, he needs, I'd shake his hand if he was in here now.
Yeah.
And moving away is possibly a good answer where they can develop, I think it's Halifax, the potential of talking about it. So I think that'll probably work better, smaller ground that they can make home and, create an atmosphere that people, a game day experience that people want to go and be part of.
The biggest worry there is, as you say, Ken Davey knows the importance of moving away. He knows that stadium's too big. And again, IMG is on the stadium utilisation, which is, the capacity compared to the attendance you get. So going to a Dewsbury where they could fill it or a Halifax fill it is much better. But then you get marked on, is that stadium Super League ready? I like the Shea. I think it's the Flair Stadium now at Dewsbury, but they're not Super League stadiums, so then you're going to drop points there.
Just to play devil's advocate, if they can get Odsal passing that criteria, they could certainly get Dewsbury, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, you're right there. Yeah, there'll be the way there. Yeah, Bradford did it, but it's just that would be my main concern, which is probably why they didn't push to move.
And Huddersfield won that game against Wigan, didn't they? Did they win, or did Wigan score right?
No, Wigan broke
scored right at the end.
I remember
the game.
Farriman scored. Was it Farriman? I think it was.
Yeah, right at the end, wasn't it? Yeah. But it obviously worked because Huddersfield competed, and I remember watching the game, and it was full of energy, and like you say, it was a good atmosphere.
Yeah,
and it probably helped their performance too.
And players play off that energy, right? You do. But look, Magsy, you mentioned there nights that you've had in that stadium at Huddersfield, and we cannot forget that famous Ryan Hall try, a little dink over the top. The helicopter was circling in the air for the League Leaders Shield, and that's always one that sticks in my mind. But moving on, John Cartwright. On social media, our beautiful fans of the game are already calling for his head. It seems to be. You're crazy, really, but he's not got 2026 up and running yet, has he? Again, another coach, another roster that's struggling with injuries.
Yeah. Going into the season, you looked at the squad on paper and you thought...
you fancied them, didn't you?
Top six.
Yeah.
And the way that they were developing under Cartwright last year, you thought they would be top six. Now, again, injuries have struck there. There's a point where, well, you look at injuries across the competition, there's no correlation. I know we had Kyle Felton last week, and we'll probably talk about the fullback curse, but they're all different injuries, so it's a hard one to judge, isn't it? But on Hull FC, there's already fans calling for a change 4 or 5 weeks in. Obviously, they lost to Elite Leopards in the Challenge Cup. There's quite a lot of pressure on Hull FC, and I just think because maybe the expectations lifted going into this year because of the squad they've got. I don't know.
Magsy, sorry.
I think it doubles down on Hull FC because of how well Hull KR are doing.
Oh, of course,
I think whenever your rivals and your biggest competitors have been successful, losing and not being your best hurts even more, doesn't it? I agree with everything you've said regarding injuries, and John Cartwright is an amazing guy, great coach, but what can you do when some of your best players, ultimately as a coach, it's really hard without your best players, without your better players. No matter, you can talk about developing, you can talk about working with younger players, and I love that as a coach, my best times are working and developing young players. But if you want to get results at the top level, you need your top players out there. You need your best players who you're paying the big money out on the field. Will Price injured, Cartwright injured, Caesar missing a few games. SAS missing games.
Yeah. James Bell's just come
James
back.
Bachelor as well.
Yeah. They can't compete without them players.
Magsy, just on you mentioned there, obviously, you haven't long been out of the game in terms of coaching. How frustrating is it for the head coach? Because us, media and fans, it's dead easy to say, point fingers and ask questions, isn't it? But what's it like dealing with an injury crisis as a head coach?
Hard. It's really hard. It's really hard, and I think you want to win, don't you? We're in this game to win. We're in this game to win and to bring some success to the club that you're part of. And we have had some great coaches all through different sports. We've had great coaches that have been able to, upskill players and get players from maybe Division 2 to Super League or whatever. But ultimately, when you've got marquee players, Will Price and other players that are not available, it's really hard to get success without them playing. And as a coach, you feel the pressure. You feel the pressure. I've been in scenarios when I was coaching at KR, I think we had 16 players one time, and we ended up beating Hull FC actually. But at CAS, through my time there, some of our senior players injured, and it's tough. It's really tough, and there's no magic answer. You've just got to front it up and get on with it.
Magsy, the saying that the best squads are the ones that go on and lift trophies at the end. It is a squad game, but again, I'm just going to ask you about your time coaching and particularly the likes of clubs like Hull FC and Huddersfield, and there'll be a few more in there that are chasing towards that top six. Are they, or do they front load their number 1 to 20 in terms of salary cap? Because your top teams at Leeds and Saints, a squad number 24 can come in and you don't lose too much. Do you know what I mean? We've saw that with Saints and Wigan and Leeds over the years. They seem to bring young kids in that are almost just ready. I think for these other chasing clubs, Magsy, is it after sort of shirts number 1 to 20 it really, really starts to hurt?
Yeah, I mean, squad depth, innit? I think it's squad depth and the ability for number 26, 27 to come in and not look out of place. And I think if you look at Hull KR, you look at St Helens, I mean, they were ravaged by injuries at the weekend, but still managed to go to CAS and get a result. Leeds have got some good squad depth, and it's a combination of having a strong academy, making sure that your young players are, I suppose, filling them slots, and when they do get an opportunity, you're confident in them because you've worked with them, you understand them, you know that they're not going to let you down. And some of the clubs that you mentioned just before there probably do go a little bit top heavy, and and then you notice the injuries. You notice when them sort of key personnel aren't playing. It's more noticeable than a Wigan when 2 young kids come in at Wigan at the weekend, like the fullback, the lad that they signed from St Helens came in, and
Sambu,
it's like scored. You don't notice it as much because they've got a good environment and they've nurtured the players, and there's no. It's not easy. It's not easy to get into that position, but for me, that's how you are successful, is squad depth, but mainly younger players that can come in and step in because you've got confidence in them.
I think Lee Leopards are another one that probably fit that bracket of putting a lot of the salary into that sort of top 17. But you mentioned then Wigan, they've lost Bevan French now for 16 weeks. That came out last week. Now, you would have said, sat here last week, I said that was a huge blow, but then you just see the way that Jack Farriman is developing, and he's going to be a superstar of the game. He's a great player. Yeah. He's got...
Footwork's incredible.
Incredible footwork. And then Noah Hodkinson came in. Now, Jai Field is going to be back. Jay Field is going to be back in a couple of weeks. But Noah Hodkinson came and stepped in, and he didn't look out of place. He was comfortable at the back. He returned well. He threatened it a couple of times. He just looked really well. So Wigan are just that perfect example of just blooding through that next.
How good's that for our game? Yeah. How good's that for our game when you've got a young full back who's come through the system? George Brown at Leeds, who stepped into the halfbacks. Yep. Brilliant. That's what that's what I want to see. I don't want to see, filling that slot with a. No disrespect again. I don't mean to be disrespectful, but maybe a journeyman Australian that's taking up an opportunity of our younger players. How are we going to get any better?
Yeah, for sure. And look, we mentioned there about academies. Warrington Wolves, their academy, their youth systems, swept everything by over the last season particularly. And they're a club that are just going about the business. Nobody's even mentioning them, are they, Warrington? But obviously a big win over Goole. And I think I read somewhere for the first time in, is it 124 years that they played each other? Or was it a first or something along them lines?
There was a first time a long time. But that probably suits Warrington well, the fact that no one's talking about
Nobody
them.
is though, are they?
No, they're not. And that probably suits them, given the year they had last year. It probably suits them just to go quietly under the radar, do their business, get the wins, and then towards the end of the year make some noise. I think that perfectly suits them, doesn't it? Just the way that last year went for them. And again, you say the academy. Now, what's the word coming out there is the next few years, they're going to have some huge stars in their hands because of the players coming through. There's a lot of buzz around Warrington, and going under the radar is nice for them.
Yeah, and it's probably not been the case for Warrington for the last 10 years. They've been spoke about a lot, haven't they, about signings and
big name signings.
Big names
as well,
in Warrington, it's going to be their year or whatever the fans sing. And so being under the radar probably suits. And, I'm a big fan of Sam, and I think he's doing some good stuff there. He's giving some of their younger players opportunities. And, I think they'll surprise a few this year. Maybe not surprise people, but I think they'll be up there competing, definitely.
And I think this is the first time in a while Warrington have got their recruitment right. I think you mentioned there that we were always talking about Warrington, the recruitment, did they get it right? They got it wrong. This year, everyone that they've signed, Apuati, Josh Smith, Liam Burns, Sipley, they all look like they're doing really well. And again, just doing their business and just solid signings. I like the way they're looking at the minute. And then obviously they brought in Steve McNamara to sort of maybe guide Sam Burgess a little bit with all of his experience.
I think what you look at alongside that is the signings have been good, but then the emergence of Kai Taylor-Ray, the Fewless brothers, brothers out there.
They are.
You know what I mean? Just good signings alongside good English players, good young English players.
Yeah.
That's how you have to do it.
No, certainly is. Well, look, we focus very much on the British game there, but let's turn our attentions to the wonderful scenes at the Allianz Stadium over in Australia in the heat of the Rabbitohs and Roosters. That Sydney derby, Alex Johnson getting 2 tries and therefore putting him at the top of the NRL all-time try scoring. There, Magsy, you've walked in them shoes. You've got over the top of Keith Senior in that famous night back in 2012 of your career against Wakefield to take that title off your teammate.
Yeah.
What was your feelings, I suppose, first of all, around that?
I mean, Keith never wanted to pass me the ball that game. Every time I passed it to him, he ran it. It's really weird. I think individual accolades are something you don't really appreciate until you finish playing. I don't know. I was always all about the team. Don't get me wrong. It's nice to score tries but I think the accolades and stuff that came with it, I probably didn't appreciate until I'd finished.
Yeah.
It was all about winning for the team, winning for my mates, winning for the club. And then when you retire and people talk to you about things, you become associated with that. So for a while, I was Super League's top try scorer, and I used to live off it a little bit, and I used to get excited about it. And then obviously Ryan Hall took it off me, so I've got nothing to talk about.
Just all Leeds just scoring tries for fun, isn't it? But Magsy, all right, look, I'm going to ask you honestly here. At what point on that sort of tally chart did you start going, I can catch Keith here?
Oh, I knew pretty soon I was going to catch him. I was still fairly young, and again, and Keith had held it for a while. I think Paul Newlove had it for a little bit, and Keith had it for a long time. So I think in sport things you have titles and accolades for a while, and then some young pretender comes and takes it off you. That's just the nature of sport, innit? And me and Ollie are great mates, and I'd like to think I assisted a lot of Ryan's tries, or not a lot, but a few of Ryan's tries. So I can take a little bit of, knowing that helped him along the way as well. And I think Josh Charlie's probably going to take it off him at some point. So
he's chomping at the bit, isn't he? Was it 9 behind him or something? Is it
close? Yeah,
it's close.
And he's still doing well, Josh Charlie. I think he chased down. I can't remember which Hull FC winger it was who made a break. And Josh Charlie showed some pure pace to track him down.
Well, he's got a couple of years left on Ryan Hall as well, hasn't he? And you also forget about his time over in his time at Rugby Union as well. I know Ryan Hall obviously went over to the NRL as well. But going back to that game, the Sydney derby, what about them pitches? There was big messages before the game around a $5,500 fine if anyone dared enter the field, and then the Prime Minister was on the field as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, it was unbelievable scenes, wasn't it? But I think that was Friday morning, so fair play and respect for Wakefield for turning it and making it about Super League with the light switching off at the end there. I enjoyed that. Yeah, so fair play to Wakefield. But yeah, unbelievable scenes there. All the fans invading the pitch. If they was to find everyone that went on it, they'd be making some money. But I don't think they are. I think they've. There's too many in there to go after there.
Well, Magsy's tally chart got knocked off by Ryan Hall. We mentioned Josh Charnley. I suppose then Magsy, given the numbers that they're going to get to, let's say it ends up being 260 or whatever. Do you think, or do you ever see that record being broken again? Because that's an awful lot of tries, isn't it? I know games are more high scoring now, or they seem to have been this season. I'm
not sure, I'm not sure. I think it'll be really hard. Maybe Josh might go 270 up there, and I think there's not as much loyalty now in the game, is there? The world's a bigger, an easier place to get around, Rugby Union, NRL. So your superstars or your try scorers will, I hope our game's in a great place in 10 years. I'm not right confident, but I hope it is. But there's so many more opportunities for players now to go and, see other things and play other sports. So I'd be shocked if it's broken soon, but ultimately they're always there. Records are there to be broken out there. So we'll see.
Well, speaking on broken, we've mentioned a number of players or a number of squads that have broken down through injury. We had Kyle Felt on last week, and he made a really interesting point, Josh. And I just want to ask, I want to ask both of your opinions on this, really. He talked about when the 6 again rule came out in Australia, the number of injuries, knee injuries, muscle tears, that as the players were adapting and trying to get up to speed with the new version of the game. We've talked a lot about our new interpretation of the ruck, the new version of it, if you want to call it that. Are we guilty of trying to, find a direct correlation here about all these injuries, and particularly in fullback? Now, I know a few of those fullbacks aren't anything to do with muscular. Obviously, Jay Field with his appendix, etc. But there's a lot of players going down, isn't there, at the moment? Yeah,
there is. George Flanagan was his ankle, so that's the other one. We've asked head coaches and they just seem to bat it out because there is just no real correlation between these injuries, but there is an obvious speed up of the game, so it's going to have some impact on the hamstrings and stuff like that. I don't know, Danny, when you're watching it as well, but Kai Taylor, again, he became the latest victim, didn't he? The latest fullback victim. He's out for a couple of weeks, which is a blow to Warrington, but I don't think it was as long as first.
If you look at fullbacks, though, the top 4 metre makers in Super League are fullbacks. Fullbacks do more running than anybody else, so they're more. I think when you're tired and you're under fatigue, that's probably when you put your body in positions that you might not do. When you're fresher, you might stick your arm out and it's a shoulder, or you might overstretch, or sometimes when you're fatigued, and fullbacks are probably more fatigued than anybody, you put yourself in positions that you might not. Some's just unlucky, an impact injury or something that you can't control. But I'm a big believer that and again, I've got to be careful what I say here, but I think sometimes we look at sports science too much, and you might be able to speak a little bit as well, but every player's got a GPS. And I remember sometimes we're coaching and, your S&C coach would come on and say, right, your time's done, and I'd throw him off field because I wanted to do more. And I think sometimes we're a little bit protective of our players, and they're not, I don't feel they're as durable as they were back in the day. The game's quickened up, it's different. I'm not saying they're not as tough, because they are, but I just think sometimes we're a little bit led by S&C, sports science, and Brian Mack, our old coach, he'd throw the computer in the bin sometimes and say, right, we're having an old school session today, and I don't know. Again, I might be wrong here, and I'm probably going to get the scientists emailing in saying I'm not saying the right things, but we just have to be careful that we're not too led by sports science, because it's not stopping injuries, is it?
No, it's certainly not. And any sports scientists out there that want to comment, please do so. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to like and subscribe so we can get near to 10,000 as well. But no, jokes aside, I'm going to read out the list of injuries we've got, particularly at fullback: Jack Welsby, Jay Field, Bevan French, Billy Hodgson, Arthur Morg, Niall Evans, Declan Murphy, David Armstrong, George Flanagan, Will Price, Kai Taylor, Blake Taft, Fletcher Rooney. Now, you'd argue that 10 of them are stars of the game. You know, and high. You know, we talked about salary cap earlier and front loading that in terms of your 1 to 20, if you like. But some noticeable absentees definitely in there. Your sports science again. You mentioned. I wonder whether the amount of games that we're playing now. Are players being exposed to being too much under fatigue at speed? Potentially some of these muscles. But classic rugby league, isn't it? We want the game speed up. Now we're almost saying that we want it slowed down.
Can't win.
Just on your point, I think Cruz Liam made the same point when Catalans went over and played Lee a couple of weeks ago, and they had all the trouble with their travel. And Cruz Lima said all the conditioning and everything that you plan for. He didn't say it doesn't matter, but you could plan for it, you can get condition for it, but ultimately it's about what you do on the field. So you're probably right that you could probably over condition and overthink that strength and conditioning side when it all matters on the field, doesn't it? It's just a strange game at the minute, isn't it, rugby league?
I just think it's disappointing for fans. Some of the players that are listed there are stars of the game, and we're not going to get an opportunity to see Bevan French, Jai Field for a few weeks, Kai Taylor, who's burst onto the scene. You want to see more of him, and I think it's us that lose out by this injury, isn't it? It's the game that loses out, and I don't know the answer again. I've just tried to throw a few suggestions there, but it's just disappointing for the game that we're not seeing the stars every week.
Well, 2 out of that list are from Castleford, Lee and Wigan. Which clubs are missing the most in terms of that? You'd argue Wigan, right?
We'll miss them the most.
Well, yeah. Well, some big games coming up for Wigan, so that will tell.
I would have. I mean, even last week I would have, but just watching Jack Farriman and just the way that he can slot in, and he's not replacing Bevan French, he's his own player, but just the step he's got. If Field's back in a couple of weeks, I think Wigan have managed to adapt to. Now, Bevan French, don't get me wrong, people say, it's his time of the year where he's injured. He still averages a good amount of games for Wigan every year, but I think Wigan have managed to adapt to live without him at times, and Jack Farriman will step up. I think Lee might struggle. I think Lee could be the biggest ones. And Casford, we know that they're on the hunt for a new fullback.
You say that though, but statistically, Josh, last year and previous years gone by, when Field and French don't play, it's Wigan that suffer. Now opportunity knocks, doesn't it, for Farrimond and Hodgkinson, to really make a big claim for their own, isn't it? It's be interesting to see how it unfolds, but
I just think Jack Farrimond, we talk about superstars, rising superstars. There's one at Warrington as well, you and Irwin, but Jack Farrimond, I think he's 20 years old now. He probably wants that chance to play every week. And that's good for the English game.
I was just going to ask Magsy that. He's 20-year-old. He's played a number of games. He's shown up pretty well in every game. How frustrating is it for him then that he's not really being able to get his way into that first team regularly?
I think it's hard as a young player. I think when you get to that sort of level where you'd be probably playing in most other clubs. If Jack Farriman's at any other club, he's probably playing regularly. He's probably playing more regularly, but he's got probably the best player in the competition in front of him, and the current England number 7 as well. And so I just think it's hard for a young player. You've got to bide your time, and when we're talking a lot about injuries, but injuries is when it normally opens up opportunities for young players, and you've got to take it. I think Hull FC, Will Price is probably the biggest loss in fullbacks. I think he's their marquee player, is their go-to player, is the player that can make things happen. And we're talking about biggest losses. I think he's Hull FC's biggest loss, and probably the game's biggest loss.
Yeah, and if you look at Hull FC, I think across the first 5 weeks, they're only averaging 13 points scored a game, so there's a big problem, and he's their spark, and he's what they're going to miss, and it's going to take Arthur a few weeks to get into the groove of Super League. But when you need a spark and you need those points, Will Price is the man you're looking at, so the fact they've lost him for the year, as you say, is a huge blow for the Black and Whites.
Well, we wish every one of those 13 players and the rest of those that are out, of course, denying us fans the opportunity to see the best quality on the field. We wish them well in their recovery, but that, I'm afraid, is all we've got time for this week. Do not forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We want to hear from you, as we ask every single week. Please comment on anything that Josh, Danny and myself have talked about. There's been plenty in there in terms of what's been going on in the last 7 days from the world of rugby league. Don't forget in the comments as well to swipe to the left, reveal that hype button and click that up to 3 times a week so we can keep on growing and giving you more shows like Back 10 and everything else that comes from the platform of All Out Rugby League. Take care. Bye-bye for now.